Security headlines.
New cooperative ransomware negotiations get hijacked. The FBI had ransomware decryption key for weeks before giving it to victims, and a new leak of Epik data exposes the company's entire server. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and certainly some expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Steve Zalewski, co-host of Defense in Depth. Steve, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
All right. And of course, we want to thank our sponsor, VMware, for making this show possible. We will talk more about them in just a moment. You may have heard of them. And you can join us on Crowdcast to join in the discussion. If you have any comments on the stories as we're going through them, let us know. We got the link right up there, and you can go check it out and join in on the fun. We got 20 minutes, though, so let's get going. First up, new cooperative ransomware negotiations are getting hijacked. Hard to say, easy to understand. Following up on a story we brought you last week, less than 48 hours before the deadline arrived for Iowa-based grain organization New Cooperative to pay a ransom to Black Matter, the negotiation chat was hijacked by a troll. The chat, which was occurring on Tor, included defiant and aggressive commentary from the supposed victim's side, suggesting that Black Matter actually deposits some Bitcoin in their account as a good faith demonstration and used the catchphrase most often associated with Anonymous, "We are Legion," before adding, "No more chicken, pork, and grain for you." Cybersecurity experts state this is another example of how the hijacking of negotiations is extremely possible and can add to complications for victims. So, Steve, I think we're seeing this sort of as a trend here of ransomware negotiations themselves being a target for hijacking, either by trolls like Anonymous or something like that, or ransomware gangs themselves kind of double dipping with organizations and negotiators and stuff like that. What does this say about the change in tactics for these operators?
I kind of summarize it as there is no honor among thieves. Okay. At the end of the day, the marketplace, for ransomware, for the rest of this, everybody wants a piece of your money. And so I look at this and I say, look at how creative they are to be able to jump on each other's monetization so that they can be a middleman as well. So I see this continuing. I think you're going to see continued creativity in the marketplace as all of the thieves realize they just want a piece of the money as well. So that's how I kind of summarize it and say it is just going to continue.
Is there a danger? The phrase ransomware as a service has kind of just become commonplace now in security circles. Is there a danger of looking at that with as a service kind of implying almost a legitimate business model, even though it's crime? Certainly, is there a danger in that obscuring that these are just criminals and they're just looking to get paid?
I would say if anybody is surprised that the marketplace for the criminals has now basically gone mainstream and they provide support, they sell the products, it's just kind of like, well, wake up. Unfortunately, that is the way it is. And so they have a very legitimate marketplace out there that is, to be able to do evil, and it will continue to mature. They will continue to find what almost looks like legitimate ways to generate illegitimate revenue.
All right, next up here, U.S. Congress asked the FBI to explain a delay in helping Kaseya attack victims. Following up on a story we brought you on Monday, the House Committee on Oversight and Reform has requested a briefing to understand the rationale behind the FBI's decision to delay providing the victims of the Kaseya REvil ransomware attack with a universal decryption key for 3 weeks, asking how many businesses, schools, and hospitals lost money and time while trying to recover their data and restore impacted systems. We recovered this effectively when that universal decryptor was dropped. A lot of organizations said, we already did the work. We're back up and running. Otherwise, we'd be out of business or, really in a lurch. The FBI has said the delay was because of a plan to disrupt the REvil ransomware gang without tipping them off. So is this, Steve, is this just the Vulcan logic, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few in this case? And is this just Congress maybe trying to save face and say, hey, this doesn't look good for optics for a lot of these organizations?
I look at it from the perspective of, putting myself in the FBI's position, which is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because if you have that intelligence and you try to act on it tactically. To their point, their responsibility is towards all companies, not specific ones. And so you can make a tactical decision to help a few, but really they're trying to take down the larger networks. And so they really do have actionable intelligence, but they can't act on it many times because again, they want to take down the larger network. When it doesn't happen like this, it looks bad, right? Then people are saying, well, why'd you hold it? Because you weren't able to actually take down the networks. Well, hindsight being 2020, they do have a responsibility to protect all of us, not anyone. So I would say it's kind of a blend of what you said. And yes, Congress wants to understand it, but I think there are many in Congress and elsewhere that once you understand the true nature of what the FBI is responsible for, and it makes for good airtime, right? Good sound bites. But the reality is we have to move on and let the FBI do their job.
All right, next story here. A new leak of Epik data exposes the company's entire server. Anonymous has released what it claims to be new data from the controversial web hosting company Epik in a leak it's calling the B-Sides. This is a follow-up on the breach of Epik earlier this month, and this time it says it's leaked several bootable disk images of assorted systems in a roughly 70 gigabyte torrent file. The disk images represent Epik's entire server infrastructure with all programs and files required to host the application it's serving. The data includes API keys and plain text login credentials, not just for Epik systems, but we're talking things like Coinbase, PayPal, and the company's Twitter account. The horse is out of the barn. So, Steve, is this a new high, or I guess a new low? Anonymous stealing an entire infrastructure. Epik obviously has a lot of baggage with it. I don't think anyone's shedding any tears necessarily, but first I've seen of something like this severe for this.
So my take here is just like ransomware is trying to be disruptive and it can disrupt a lot of your business processes. I kind of feel sorry for Epik because what they literally have to do now is burn down their data center. They will never be able to patch it given how compromised it is. And so I'm thinking, I hope they're ready to just turn off that data center and go to another one, and you got to rebuild it all from scratch. So just like ransomware is, how good are you at backups? Well, this is a much larger problem because rebuilding a data center from the ground up, so that way all of the secret keys, all of the API interfaces, all the PKI, the only way you're going to do it is a rebuild from the ground up. And that is incredibly disruptive to a company. And then I look at that and I think, how many companies are prepared to be able to burn down their data center and rebuild it in any kind of a reasonable time frame?
I do have to say this is a very unique situation for Epik, though, because this is clearly that event that requires them to do this, whereas opposed most organizations have a death of 1,000 cuts, and there's no clear signal of it. Now it's time to just shut it down and start from scratch. I guess in a weird way, it's an opportunity to do better, but also a nightmare scenario at the same time.
Well, and then the question is, do they have the wherewithal to make that hard decision, or are they just going to try to treat it as death by 1,000 cuts, thinking they can put it all back together like Humpty Dumpty, right? And the answer is, you do that, you're really doing a disservice. But on the other hand, think about just what that means if when you actually, face the fact that I'm going to do a rebuild, not just of 5 servers, but of everything that my company is built on. And I think a lot of people know, like I do, which was when you have complex systems, you don't just rebuild them all, turn them all on and make them work, right? They've taken years to get to where they are. People don't necessarily understand everything. So like ransomware can absolutely destroy a company. Something like this can effectively put them out of business because they just actually don't know how to rebuild their data center.
Our next story here, NSA and CISA share guidelines for securing VPNs. On Tuesday, the National Security Agency and the Department of Homeland Security's Cyber Wing published guidelines for securing VPNs, cautioning that foreign government-backed hackers are actively exploiting vulnerabilities in virtual private network devices. The NSA warned that unfortified VPNs are at risk of attacks from advanced persistent threat groups that exploit publicly exposed security flaws in the Common Vulnerabilities and or CVE database. The latest recommendations include selecting VPNs from reputable vendors, patching known vulnerabilities, and running features that are only strictly necessary. This guidance comes from the NSA and CISA to focus on defenses against threats to federal agency employees who have shifted to working from home as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Steve, I'm kind of torn here. Obviously, like, none of this is bad advice, but is this just table stakes kind of advice that, government employees or organizations in general should already be taking?
It is, but here's what it really points out. You get what you pay for. That doing the right thing may cost more money, and people always are looking for ways to cut the corner. So you want to go use some shareware VPN infrastructure, right? Or some third-party stuff that is maybe not as legitimate as you believe. You're welcome to do it. Maybe save $1 so you can be, penny wise and pound foolish here. And that's when I see this, which is, everybody thinks it's not going to happen to them. Oh, I'm just going to download this shareware or freeware because all VPN products are the same at this point. They're all based on the same PKI infrastructure. And the answer is no, not everything is equal. So when I see this, it just reminds me to tell people, just like every other decision in life, you get what you pay for. So do you want to put your company at risk using something that may open you up as opposed to spend a few more dollars, right? And be sure about that. But people make decisions for a lot of reasons, and not all of them may be right in my mind, but I can't, your mileage may vary.
Absolutely. And Grant, thanks for your comment in Crowdcast. He said it's amazing how lax Epik security was. I wonder, though, how lax it would be. Like, I mean, clearly Epik put a target on their back. I also feel like that's why they were targeted by Anonymous. I wonder how many other organizations would be in a similar boat if they chose to put a similar target on their back. I guess would be my final comment on that. Before we move on to our next story, though, I want to take a quick moment and thank our sponsor, VMware, and their upcoming event, VMworld. Accelerate your own zero trust journey. The strongest defense against modern threats comes from a zero trust posture. The trick is getting there quickly and easily from where you already are. At VMworld 2021, VMware will show how you can help you operationalize zero trust, whatever your starting point. Learn how to get the strongest security for your workloads and workspaces across your multi-cloud and edge with solutions that protect inside and cross-cloud, from the API level and up, all the way to the workspace. Strength flows from the convergence of security and the network distributed everywhere your data and endpoints are. The networking, security, and edge tracks have a variety of value-packed breakout sessions. Join thousands of your peers by registering now at vmware.com/VMworld. Moving on to our next story, Delaware develops cybersecurity education program for senior citizens. According to the FBI 2020 Internet Crime Report, people over the age of 60 reported being victims of cybercrime more than any other age group, with losses totaling over $965 million in 2020 nationwide. Now, Delaware, the state which dubbed October Cybersecurity Awareness Month, has introduced an educational cybersecurity program for senior citizens through its Department of Technology and Information. The program will cover the benefits of multi-factor authentication, identifying spam calls and phishing emails, and protecting social media and email accounts. Steve, I don't think there's any revelation that scammers target senior citizens. I feel like the ability for technology to have that scale is something that we're continuing to deal with here. But do you feel like over time we're going to see more local initiatives just based on the explosion of threat surfaces and possible ways for people to scam you through social engineering or through phishing, that kind of stuff? We're going to see local initiatives kind of across age brackets, or will senior citizens always need to be a special focus?
So I hope we see more. In my mind, I hope we treat everybody as a snowflake and target security awareness training to as many of the demographics and as many of the types of people out there as possible. And so the fact that seniors are, at a much higher risk, it makes a lot of sense to do this, because cybersecurity is a technology and sophistication of being able to use your phones. Seniors aren't necessarily as adept at this because they weren't brought up with it. So, they want to learn, but their capacity to learn and the way they think about it makes them, a unicorn or a snowflake. So I could see it for 70 to 80-year-olds. I can see it for 60 to 70-year-olds. They're going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. We all are. We're going to click. So, I say security awareness campaigns, is you do it early, you do it often, and you do it as many unique ways as you can. So I think this is just something that we have to do, and we need to invest more into it.
Most definitely. And something, I completely agree with you. I mean, we could go down the whole rabbit hole here, but investment definitely will be warranted, and I think pay off for sure long term. Next up here, now we have to worry about ransomware targeting backups. Conventional wisdom is that good backups, coupled with a good recovery strategy, can't stress that enough, is critical for combating the threat of ransomware. A new report from the cyber risk prevention firm Advanced Intelligence, though, shows that ransomware operators are keenly aware of this, with the Conti ransomware operators particularly focusing on backed up data. Research has shown that the need to restore data is the primary motivator in Conti ransomware negotiations, with extortion over published exfiltrated data a secondary concern. That's the thing that gets a lot of focus, but clearly Conti doesn't see, or companies are seeing that as, yeah, that's bad, but not as bad as not getting our data. Conti starts its focus on backups from a team building level, recruiting candidates based on that skill. The ransomware gang is particularly focused on compromising backup software from the disaster recovery firm Veeam. So, Steve, is this a move to make more money by Conti, or I guess maybe a change in overall motive for these ransomware operators?
So I would argue that what I'm seeing in my perspective with ransomware is it started out as a money-making opportunity, but the likelihood of success is relatively low. And so it's turning into punitive damage. They are damaging a company where they know they actually have low likelihood of being able to monetize the event. And so now that they're targeting your backups and they're trying to weasel in further, upstream of compromising your data so that they have additional opportunities to hold you hostage, but they're not going to get any higher likelihood that you're going to pay out. And so what we're seeing in my mind is simply pure punitive, destructive behavior for the sake that they can do it. And if they make a little money, that's great. But then they leave all these companies hurt. And so to me, I don't look at it as, an additional revenue opportunity. It kind of is. But I'm just looking at, holistically, the fact that what the ransomware and attackers are doing is just setting everybody back. They are really not doing themselves justice, and they're certainly not giving us an opportunity to balance the risk and the reward. So it really frustrates me when I just see that pure punitive play. It's just, come on, guys. If you're here to make money, that's one thing. If it's a hacktivist attack and you're out here trying to damage me, when you use ransomware, you have no interest in making money. You just want to hurt me. So kind of decide which it's going to be, and stop just throwing, paint at the wall and realizing maybe I get some money, but in the meantime, I've hurt you really bad. And I don't think they understand the true damage of what they're doing.
All right, and our final story of the day, cybercriminals bypass 2FA and OTP with robocalling and Telegram bots. Basically, everyone's least favorite things. According to a new report from cybercrime intelligence firm Intel 471, the latest development in 2FA bypassing involves the use of robocalls with interactive messages that are meant to trick users into handing over their one-time password or OTPs in real time as attackers are trying to access their accounts. All of this is automated and controlled by using Telegram-based bots, much like teams and organizations use Slack bots to automate workflows. At their core, these are social engineering attacks with just a high level of automation. Steve, how do we get to a point where we can train people not to fall for this sort of thing? And how much harder, I guess, does more sophisticated automation potentially make it?
So we're not going to fix this. We can't. Now, what really gets me is what the bad guys are doing is they're using automation and they're using machine to human attack at the speed of light, so to speak. Okay. They're just coming at you. So instead of you maybe having an opportunity to make a mistake because you're targeted 2 or 3 times a day, now you're targeted 2 and 3 times a minute. Okay. That's what they're doing. Yet we, on the other side, put humans in front of computers, expecting the human is somehow going to be intelligent enough to know not to click every time. It just doesn't compute. Okay. You can't solve the problem by expecting the human to be infallible. right? And the bad guys know that. So when they're throwing technology at me and speed of attack, and I'm counting on a human to at every time have the wherewithal to think it through, people click, especially with COVID now, right? Everybody talks about this, which was we're working from home, we're working from everywhere. You're working with your kids in your office. You have a whole new set of stressors that are outside of your normal office that the bad guys know. And so they're targeting these attacks knowing that they're going to get a higher click rate because they're taking advantage of it. So to me, this is the way of the future. It is going to continue like this. The onus is security awareness training early and often, but we do have to look at automation on our side and machine automation and what I call containment, which is how quickly can I realize somebody made the mistake and bring them back into the fold. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, kind of reduce the amount of damage from inevitably failing. Set up a system, set up your security posture that way, as opposed to, hey, the drawbridge is down, come on in.
Yep.
All right. So, Steve, before we get out of here, is there any particular story that was really got you excited, made your eyes roll? Anything that particularly stood out today on the show?
I would say the Epik breach, simply because what they've done, as you see, is they've upped the bar to don't worry about data backups, but can you burn down the data center and put it back? And that problem is so much harder than simply trying to recover data. So to me, that attack and what they've done is an eye-opener for a whole lot of people to realize just how good is your disaster recovery, I'll call it that, planning. Now that you're going to see more and more of these attacks that are effectively going to result in, right, you having to turn everything off and rebuild. That is just scary.
All right. And where can people find you, Steve, if they want to find out more of your great stuff?
Well, they can certainly look on CISO Series. I do defense in depth. You are welcome to look me up on LinkedIn. Both of those are great ways to be able to get a hold of me. I'm always available, whatever I can do to help, right? It's a village to raise the child, and we are the village.
All right, and let's raise those kids. Thank you so much, Steve Zalewski. Really appreciate your time on the show today. And of course, want to thank our sponsor, VMware. You can also come on back next week on Friday for our CISO series video chat, Hacking Regulations, an hour of critical thinking of moving regulators from operational to risk-based auditing. We have a fantastic slate of live content every single Friday over here at the CISO series. That starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's followed by a meetup, and then we'll be back with another edition of the Week in Review. Told you we got a great slate. Friday, 12:30 p.m. Pacific, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And remember, you can get cybersecurity headlines every single day, get you all caught up with the biggest news and a little bit of context in about 6 minutes in your podcast feed. You can get all the details, CISOseries.com. Until then, I'm Rich Straffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
From the CISO series, it's cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.